When you were 11, what did you think you would be doing now?
In the opening of Aftersun, we see a recorded memory that pauses to reveal a woman on the other side of the screen, observing, searching, trying to reach back in time. Over the course of the film, she will go on to construct a beautifully intricate mosaic of memories, artifacts, and imagination to try and piece together a fragmented past and to reconcile the memory of her father with the truth of who he really was underneath. And it all begins in Turkey with a seemingly inconspicuous vacation. This video was brought to you by Mubi, which is now streaming Aftersun in many countries. Stick around till the end to learn more. When I was around Sophie's age, I went on a similar trip to Turkey, and even though I don't have many explicit memories of it anymore, what I do remember quite vividly, more than any particular experience or encounter, is what it felt like. I remember that tiresome bus ride from the airport, the anxiety of arriving at an unfamiliar hotel in the dark, not knowing if you're even at the right place, and the relief of that first morning when you finally have a chance to really get your bearings and settle in. But most of all, I remember the general vibe of what it was like to stay at a resort like that. There was this weird sense of understimulation that is hard to imagine now. It wasn't boredom per se, but you know, for a kid there was only so much to do in these places. A swimming pool, a few games, a book to read. There weren't any smart TVs yet, so that black box in the room was pretty much useless. The animation team wasn't exactly top tier entertainment, and I also wouldn't get my Game Boy Color until a year later. And so the only other thing that was left to do was to seek out some kindred spirits, make some friends.
I'm Marco, by the way.
Thinking back on it, it's kind of remarkable how quickly, especially as a kid, you can get a sense of the social dynamics of a new place, and how strangely important the desire can be to fit yourself into it. I remember how, despite only being in Turkey for a week or so, the connections I made briefly felt as real and urgent as the ones I had back at home, with the swimming pool area becoming like the playground at school, the grand stage for human drama and intrigue. Was it really so? As an adult, I want to say it obviously wasn't, but that would be a denial of what it felt like when I was a kid. When you're young, time moves slower. It's only when you grow into adulthood that you really start to notice its pace picking up. It's only logical, really. After all, the longer you are alive, the smaller the same unit of time becomes in proportion to the totality of your lived existence, which makes the experience of its passage less and less significant.
You have time.
Whereas now it feels like I can blink and the year passes. Back then, time could still drag. It still felt weighty.
You okay, so? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And this, I think, explains why Aftersun is presented the way that it is. Why so much of it just feels like a random collection of holiday memories. It's because there's not just a gap between past and present, but also a dissonance in the experience of time. Sophie, now with an adult awareness, an adult focus, reaches back into her past in search for the truth about her father, and has to contend not only with the unknown, with the missing pieces in her memory, but also with the implications of this being her past as experienced and captured by her younger self. It is why, like Sophie, we too are navigating our way through what feels like a completely separate story. A coming-of-age tale of a child who was still largely unconcerned with the weight of time, who was still figuring herself out, trying to fit in with her peers, and who certainly couldn't yet grasp the fullness of what her father was really going through.
Happy birthday, Dad.
This, however, is not to say that young Sophie was completely oblivious to her father's struggles. Quite the opposite, in fact. Again, I think we often tend to underestimate the sensitivity and social awareness of children, even if they do not yet have the experience or insight to contextualize things in the way that adults can. They pick up a lot. Sophie, for example, seems well aware that money is an issue for Callum, and therefore doesn't make light of her accidentally losing her scuba mask.
I know it was expensive.
Though she shows a lot of sympathy here, there's also a frustration later on when Sophie feels like her dad is overspending his money on her.
Stop doing that.
Doing what?
Offering to pay for something when I know you don't have the money.
If anything, moments like these function as anchoring points, both for us as well as for adult Sophie, to connect closer with Callum, to get a better understanding of him not as a father, but as a person.
Happy birthday, Sophie.
It doesn't feel like a stretch to assume that the whole story is set in motion by adult Sophie now being the same age that her father was back in Turkey. Because even though we spent little time with her, we do learn it's her birthday. And this, in my experience at least, is an interesting turning point in life that we don't often talk about. The moment when you reach the same age that your parents or caregivers had in those early memories of them. And how this can lead to a quiet yet profound recontextualization of those memories. A while ago I digitalized the VHS tapes of my own childhood, shot mostly by my father who, in another strange moment of synchronicity, also had his arm in a cast for a while there. I had seen these tapes when I was younger, dozens of times even, but whereas I used to focus on the past image of myself, I now feel more drawn to the figure carrying my resemblance and appearing to be around the same age that I am now. It's one thing to know that your parents were once in the same position that you are in, but it's another thing to see it so directly and being able to relate to it so fully.
You're doing it again for everybody, as usual.
As children, we don't really look at our parents as individuals. We see them mostly as the function they have for us. And even as we grow older, and do come to connect with them as more than mere parental figures, I think there's some part of us that still sees them as symbolic for a kind of maturity, a kind of adulthood that seems to lie permanently on the horizon for ourselves. We move through our youth believing we will someday reach a point where all falls into place, where we will have our life in order and where we will finally be full-on adults, like our parents are. If you've made it through your 20s, you know that this doesn't really happen. Not in the way you imagined it anyways. And it's that disillusionment that makes you look back differently. Not just at your own life, but at that of your parents as well. Revisiting those memories now, it makes you realize, truly realize, that you are not seeing parents, not seeing capital A adults, but simple human beings. People who are as complex, flawed and fallible as anyone else, and who haven't figured out their lives any more than you have. And it is here that Sophie encounters what is arguably the main obstacle in the film. Though we are not told explicitly what happened, it is pretty clear that her father is not in her life anymore, leaving her stranded in this metaphorical space, crowded, fragmented, trying to connect to a man she never truly knew, a man who is now forever out of reach. And this leaves us with Turkey, with what are perhaps the last memories that she shared with her father. We don't know for sure, but what we do know is that it's in this subjective landscape of her younger self that adult Sophie is now searching for the in-between, for the hidden clues, perhaps casting a different perspective on memories that were once seen in a different light. The fascination with the older kids, for example, may have been, at the time, driven by a desire to belong, to be part of the grown-ups, to skip ahead in the journey as I think we've all wanted at some point in our youth. But from adult Sophie's point of view, lingering on the images of these young adults having fun, drinking, partying, it no longer feels like she is looking ahead, but rather gazing backwards. She knows her father loved to dance and was no stranger to partying.
Done it all and you can too. I just want you to promise me that you'll talk to me about it, okay?
Was this the kind of person he was? Who he wanted to be? Did she get in the way of this? There are no definitive answers to be found, leading to Sophie trying to fill in the gaps on her own, trying to construct a story that feels true to the man her father could have been. even if that means inventing memories that she never had access to in the first place. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first shot in which Callum is by himself starts on Sophie falling asleep. The combination of hearing her quietly breathing and seeing her father slowly swaying around has a certain trance-like effect that, to me, suggests that we're not seeing an actual memory anymore, but rather an imagination of what could have been. Many of Callum's individual scenes feel similarly dreamy, as if we're not actually seeing his perspective, but rather that of Sophie as she's trying to figure out what he was feeling, what he was going through.
Feels like your bones don't work, they're just tired and everything is tired. Like you're sinking. I don't know, it's weird.
Again, it only offers us the suggested, but still we can piece together an image, as Sophie does, of a man out of place, who never really belonged in the environment he came from, but who couldn't find a home outside of it either.
I never felt like I really did belong there.
A man out of time, too, it seems. Reckless, financially irresponsible, someone who never envisioned himself reaching adulthood, and who now struggles to settle into it, like a lost soul who accidentally survived his own self-destruction.
I can't see myself at 40, to be honest. Surprised I made it to 30.
But clearly he was genuinely trying. Meditation, Tai Chi, and he clearly had many great qualities too. He was loving, caring and kind, patient and playful. He certainly was to her, but to others as well. A man with a big heart. Could this have been part of his pain? That he had loved to give but didn't know how to express it, or felt like he was never able to safely express it. Sophie definitely seems to explore the possibility that her father was struggling with his sexuality, wondering if there might have been more to the way he still maintained such a good relation with his ex.
Alright, love you.
Or to him being excited about the new thing that he had going on with his friend Keith.
Oh, we're still figuring it out exactly.
The only time we see Callum truly light up, or again so Sophie imagines, is when he was chatting with the diving instructor. Is this perhaps why he was off on that scuba trip even though he didn't have a license? Or then again, was this just him being reckless again? Is all this but part of Sophie's projection? Was she, as someone who is shown to be in a relation with another woman, just imagining a narrative for him that explains his life in a way that she could relate to, that she could understand? Again, we don't know for sure. We can't know for sure. For Sophie, this is the only space where her father exists now. And as we come to understand that it's not going to provide answers, the space transforms. No longer are we searching for a distant face in the hope of getting to know it. Rather, what Sophie is now confronting is a permanent emptiness. The reality that this person who she lost, who she cared for so deeply, is truly gone. The emotional struggle that we see here is heart-wrenchingly conflicted. Love and grief, anger and fear, all coming together in a dance that oscillates between Sophie resentfully pushing her dad away and trying to hold on to him for dear life. Like the final song, which cuts away just before the melody is resolved, the struggle remains without conclusion.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.
But here we can return, as Sophie does, to the actual artifacts of the past, the VHS tapes that captured what for all we know may have very well been their last moments together. But what we are looking for here is not secret clues hiding between the pixels. These fragments of recorded memories aren't so much revelatory because of their content. Well, in a way they are, but more than that, they had me thinking about something else. Looking at this VHS footage now, it is interesting to consider how it is very much a relic of a very specific time, and really only a part of the childhoods of those who grew up just after the personal camcorder became a mainstream phenomenon, but just before the smartphone would change the technological landscape all over again. Like Sophie, I was one of those children of the VHS era, with my childhood being saved, in part, on these big old blocky tapes, safely tucked away into boxes in the attic. As I went through them, one thing I noticed was just how purposefully they were handled. If an event was captured, it was done so quite extensively. After all, when you buy a tape that offers space for 90 minutes or so, you might as well fill it out. Each tape was then neatly labeled with their contents, birthdays, holidays, and so on, all of which made going through my own past relatively easy. It made it accessible with some degree of coherence. To be fair, there wasn't much here to begin with. Of the first 10 years or so of my life, I think there's about 8 hours of footage that was preserved, and by now most of that has been significantly damaged by time. But still, it had me wondering about the present, about the artifacts that I, and that so many of us in our modern society, are currently creating for our future selves. Perhaps even for our descendants who might at some point go on a similar journey as Sophie does, exploring our histories, our lives, trying to get a sense of who we were. I can imagine it won't be much easier, for even though we might be preserving way more than we ever did, not just holidays and other significant events, but also more of the everyday stuff, I think that for many it is also fragmented like never before. It is not treated with that same kind of purposefulness. We have clouds filled with images, videos, either our own or those we received from others, most of which, I think it's safe to say, is just noise. Countless scattered pieces of a larger image that is slowly fading away, and that will eventually make it impossible to even tell which puzzle they belong to. Speaking for myself at least, I had stacks of tiny little mementos of days that I was so sure I would remember if I just saved a little slice of it, but that now only seem to remind me of my failing memory. Looking back on what I had saved from these past few years, I realized just how much I was distorting what will at some point be the only remaining bridge to my past. And so I decided that I wanted to be more purposeful about it. I didn't just want to carelessly capture the occasional odd moment. I wanted to encapsulate something real. I wanted to have some real footage that could stand in for the bigger picture. Not snapshots, but actual scenes. Small movies even for the bigger events, like those VHS tapes from my youth. And that's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to capture my life more mindfully. I know I won't be able to save everything, and that's okay. I just want to have some true mementos, some artifacts that will reflect what my life was like at this given moment, how I saw the world around me, the things I cared about. And the reason that I'm sharing this is because it's also a rather long-winded way to explain what I think these VHS tapes truly revealed in the end, which I guess is what any form of capturing our lives reveals in some way or another, and that is intention. And this might just be the final revelation that Sophie has towards the end of Aftersun. It wasn't about what was on the camera, it was about who was holding it, and about what he was pointing it towards. Because with Callum doing most of the filming, what we were seeing on all this footage was, in a way, directly what he was seeing. And as such, we were also getting what was perhaps the one true glimpse into his inner world. A glimpse of what he saw as important, of what he wanted to capture, what he wanted to hold on to.
And what?
And my dad's being amazing.
Why is your dad being amazing?
And it's this gaze that seems to give Sophie some comfort in the end. This gaze that, over and over again, keeps searching out the same thing.
That's impossible, you have a massive head.
It's the one thing he takes with him as he disappears into the darkness. The one thing that is perhaps all that Sophie needed to know about him.
I love you.
Love you.
Bye.
With Aftersun, Charlotte Wells has delivered an incredibly beautiful debut film that is certainly one of my favorites of last year. I've already seen it 4 times and it just gets better with each viewing. If you want to check it out for yourself or watch it again, which, to emphasize it once more, I would highly recommend. Aftersun is now exclusively available in many countries on Mubi. Mubi is my personal go-to platform to really explore the riches of cinema. They offer hand-picked films from around the globe and have an impressive library with all kinds of choices. For those who are new to cinema, there are the timeless masterpieces to lay the foundations. And for the veteran cinephiles, there are tons of hidden gems and festival favorites. There are even curated series and specials that are really fun if you want to explore a specific theme, era, or director. Either way, with Mubi, you'll never run out of things to watch. You can try Mubi for free for 30 days by using my personal link. That's mubi.com/likestoriesofold, which you can also find in the description below. So be sure to claim your extended free trial to start your month of great cinema today.